All right, welcome everyone to another fabulous live stream for here at Thrive Space. We've got lots in store for you. It is a double part series. So part one today and part two on Thursday. Today is about the coping mechanisms or the coping strategies for relieving that pressure. And on Thursday, it's more about the sustainable habits that we can build to avoid those pressurized moments. So, how is everyone feeling today? How are you feeling? It is a beautiful day here in Vancouver. Like I said, I've been spending the summer in Vancouver, which is an amazing city. I do love places like London and all over. I think every city has its great things, and then of course there's other things that you might miss about certain cities, but each one has its blessings. And I think I wake up every day these days feeling the less pressure and more grateful. So just being grateful for everything that I've got in my life at the moment. So it's not much, but at least it's something. So I know that I've been blessed with experiences, even those pressurized ones, and also, I suppose, some of the results from that. So I've really sort of expanded my life through these pressurized experiences, and it's just a matter of helping you get through these as well. Because if you manage the stress, manage the pressure, the opportunities that lie ahead of you are so rewarding and expansive for your life. So it's sometimes when we're under the pressure is when we actually grow the most. So thank you for attending this session or this live stream event. It's really informal. It's just about sharing some strategies, sharing some insights with you just from my nearly 20-year career. So let's get into it. So where does actual pressure come from, in the corporate space? And it's really different for different individuals. For me, I've experienced all sorts of pressure, whether that's in a boardroom where I was maybe 3 years into my career, and it was just all white-haired and balding men, and the pressure was on because the company could not continue unless it got this financing and so on. And I was certainly over my head, and the youngest person in the room by miles. It was a 20-seat boardroom, and I was across from the CFO of I think maybe a $13 billion company at the time. So certainly high-pressured moments. I've plenty of experience with that. But pressure can also come from the small moments. You're just up against a deadline, and you just don't know how you're actually going to get across. So let's get into it. The three things highlighted here are some things that I've felt are the core to sort of the pressurized environment or workspace. Where does the pressure come from? Of course, it comes from the stakeholders, so our bosses. They push on some of that pressure onto us, so they don't filter it through. I've certainly had that experience, and I don't know necessarily if you've had that. Can you relate? In this one, so I've got here the overwhelming workload and expectations. So this is, I've had experiences where the workload is just unrealistic. People thought it was impossible. I made it happen, but people thought it was impossible. And you might be in that type of situation. I hear about these days that because of layoffs, people are doing more than just their job. They're doing several people. So they might be the only person in their department, and they're taking on the work of two other individuals. So the work of three people. It's just unrealistic expectations and the emotional load that goes to it, because you want to do well. You want to do well in your career, and to be given impossible expectations, it can be heartbreaking. And you're potentially a high achiever, and it's just well, that's the minimum. So then how do you go the extra mile when that's the minimum, right? So just being torn by that weighs heavy. The constant change and uncertainty. So this world more than ever is something that is changing constantly, whether it's like new regulations coming in or say new technology like AI. So for me, the new regulations. So just to give you an example, in my old field, which was auditing and accounting, when I started my career nearly 20 years ago, there was maybe like 20 procedures that were the minimum of regular sized file or a small file. And then it blew up into say over 300, close to 400 procedures that people have to do in order to complete a small to medium, a small file. So that's just astronomical in terms of the difference in workload. And has the staffing changed? Not really. So just the amount of pressure that is coming through based on changes in regulations and all of this additional procedures just to do the same thing, just to get the same sign off that we got 20 years ago. And then with technology, okay, well, the solution typically, or the answer that's given to us is typically, well, just use AI, just use technology, leverage that. But it's not the same. Because sometimes you've got to train the technology or you've got to review it and so on. It can get you partway there, but it doesn't make up for the entire difference. And then the last one here I've got highlighted is the unrealistic timelines. So that is I've been under the pressure. One particular example that is remembered by the head of risk even to today for the firm was having to do 86 financial statement audits in 6 weeks. So normally a financial statement audit, maybe people would do say 10 over 9 months or 6 months, right? So 86 in 6 weeks is just completely astronomical. And I've used that word twice today, but that's where the pressure comes from. And it's just unrealistic. People thought it was impossible, but they still pushed it onto me. And I still took it. And I think one of my challenges was the boundaries. And that's what we're going to sort of just talk about here is, for the in-moment relief, we've got coping mechanisms. And I just referenced there the boundaries because I let it happen, right? So buffer with boundaries in order to give yourself time and space to actually see what's realistic. But going first is the quick reset. So that is for in the moment relief. And it's sort of just when the pressure hits, you just need something to get to calm frame of mind. Otherwise, it can be overwhelming and you just don't know more, where to even start, right? So that paralysis that you can get when the pressure's on, when you're feeling overwhelmed, that is where it can be. That's where it can happen. And then the next element there is the shift of the mind. So you can feel like your mind is racing, racing thoughts, or it's so foggy that you can't think of a way forward. So there's mind fog or racing thoughts or just not knowing where to start. And that is the shift in the mind element there. So the first one is the quick reset. The second is the shift in mindset. And the third is buffer with boundaries. And boundaries, I know that looking at the research, at least 60% of us are struggling with boundary communication these days. And that's really important that we actually address it because that increases our risk of burnout by 40%. 40% increase in burnout risk. So it's almost it's those high achievers that push past our limits. And I certainly have been that sort. I did end up at burnout after almost 20 years, but it's something that's preventable if we do these strategies. So let's talk about it. For the in-the-moment strategies, let's look at them. The first one, the quick reset. So the first is the boxing breathing or the box breathing. So here, you can do all sorts of breathing techniques. I'm actually on a 10-day program with my aunt here, just trying different breathing techniques. There's different science and research behind them. What they do is that there's some proven to actually calm the largest nerve in our body. And that is going to then calm our nervous system. So that box breathing is, and other breathing techniques will calm the nervous system in the moment. And this is something that you can do at the desk. It's something that you can do, like, excuse yourself to go to the restroom or the washroom or the loo, wherever you are in the world. But it's something that you can do in the office and not look completely mad. So this one is so the box breathing, as an example, it's the 4 breaths. So the 4 breaths in, hold for 4 breaths, and 4 breaths out, and then hold again. And you repeat that several times. Typically people do it for 4 times in order to get into a rhythm. But once you do that, what you'll find is that when you get your head back onto the screen, you're thinking a bit more clearly. So you've calmed the nervous system, and you can sort of take a step back, look at what's ahead of you, and be able to prioritize and communicate effectively as to, all right, well, I need to push this off. I need to delete this because that's not important. And I need to prioritize this one. So being able to have that calm frame of mind in order to be able to assess the priorities is key. And you can do that with breathing. So the next one on the list here is a cold splash. So I never like cold showers, but I have had them before. And if you've ever had that, it is something that shocks the system. So is this something that you try, or something that you're willing to try? Perhaps not necessarily a cold shower, but certainly if you excuse yourself and go to the restroom and just splash some cold water in your face. For women in the office, you might not necessarily want to do that because your makeup will run. But if you're at home, that you can certainly try that. And I've certainly done that. And once again, it shocks the system. It interrupts the overwhelm, spiral, the panic response, and just helps you clear the mind to think clearly. So this one is a body response. Your body is overreacting, and that splash of cold water will shock the system and help you think fresh for the morning. It also then energizes you as well. So if you can bear those cold showers, absolutely recommend them in order to energize your day. It's not something that I like to do, but I have done it when my boiler is broken and so on. So let's get to the next one here. That's the shoulder drop. So the shoulder drop, you pick up your shoulders to your ears and then you drop them quickly. And pick up your shoulders to the ears and drop them quickly. So if you do that several times, can you feel a bit of relief there? So why don't you try it right now? Pick up your shoulders to your ears and then drop. And shoulders up and drop. Once again, this is something that you can do at your desk without looking completely mad. So if you are a bit more self-conscious, you can also go to the washroom and do that. But once again, if you do it for a few times, you'll feel a little bit less tension within your body. Because if you ever go to a massage therapist, typically what they say with us in computers and corporate, is that we're holding a lot of tension in our shoulders, in our back, in our neck, because we're hunched over, we're stressed, and we're in this frame. So if you just pull your shoulders back, put them up and drop them down several times, try that absolutely this week. See if you notice the difference. And the next one, so the shift, so we've just talked about the quick resets. The quick resets are more for the body, right? Let's get that body, that nervous system, back to a steady state. The next is the shift in the mindset. So how do we clear that fog away and think clearly? So this one, what we've got here is the sensory grounding exercises. We've got the brain dump and we've got the mental pause. So let's get through it. So first, the sensory grounding exercises. This one, a common example is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you count, you can certainly do this one. So it's about naming 5 things that you see. So anything that you see around the room. And then the next is 4 things that you can touch. So you can touch your desk, you can touch your laptop, you can touch the lamp, you can touch the wall, you can touch the floor. Like, so what can you touch, right? And then 3 things that you can hear. Typically, there's like no background noise within an office. There might be some birds chirping, hopefully, but in the center of the city, it might be difficult to hear that. It might be someone's like phone ringing or something like that. So just 3 things that you can hear around you. And then the second is 2 things that you can smell. So you might be able to smell the perfume or cologne from the person next to you, or a terrible smell, whichever it is, whether it's a lovely smell or a terrible smell, is just 2 things that you can smell. And then 1 thing that you can taste. So maybe take a sip of that coffee, take a sip of that water, just 2 things that you can, or just 1 thing that you can taste. And what that does is that interrupts the response. So it gets your mind out of a spiral. And it stops the spiral, stops the overwhelm, and you're then able to think clearly, take a step back and look at what's ahead of you as matter of fact, and be able to prioritize through that. So it's so key to do that. I haven't necessarily actually practiced this one, but another one that I did try was just sort of imagining a lemon. So imagine what it looks like, imagine what it tastes like, what it smells like, and that that lemon is a bit bitter, and so it's sort of if you focus your mind on something else like this, what it does is that it interrupts the panic, it interrupts the overwhelm, and so that's what you're trying to achieve with this one, and so you're able to then go back to your actual work and think clearly. So this is one that you can practice in the office, because no one needs to know that you're actually going through this. And it's something that, all right, you're just looking around and it looks normal. So you're able to ground yourself. The next one is the brain dump. So this one is particularly for you if you've got a racing mind, you've got so much going on, there's everything coming at you at once. So I know that when I was running or managing teams in the field in multiple countries, so in Mongolia, China, the Arctic, Canada, I was running multiple teams at once. So the time zones did not cooperate with me. I was getting pings, emails, phone calls, all different times, trying to manage and coordinate and oversee these teams and the work that they were doing. And so for that, when you've got bosses and clients phoning you and, staff needing your attention, or even just family members and things like that outside of work, it can be overwhelming. And so, you've got a to-do list. So, it's almost the groceries that you need for that night's dinner. You need to get a new cell phone, or you need to get, something to pick up things, or you need to do this on this particular project and this other thing on this other project. Just write it all down. So it depends on how long you have, but you can take 5 to 10 minutes to just jot it down on paper. And it's best to actually jot it down on paper rather than on the laptop. It was just emphasized to me yesterday that there is a difference there in terms of if you actually write it down on paper, old school style, versus type on a laptop. So I know that we tend to type things on a laptop these days, but if you can just take a piece of paper from the printer and write things down. That physical movement then helps, once again, you clear your mind, clear the fog. You can then see everything on the paper and decide actually what's important. What's your next step? So the next one that we've got for shifting mind is the mental pause. So the mental pause is just taking 30 seconds to think about a calm place where a place that gives you calm, peacefulness. So if you've ever been to a retreat, or if you go to yoga or something like that, just pausing and thinking about your yoga studio, or on a holiday in terms of sitting on the beach, your happy place, wherever it might be, just thinking of that calm, peaceful, happy place, and just thinking about that for 30 seconds and then going back to it. Once again, it interrupts the spiral, it interrupts the thinking. Because you're thinking about a happy or calm place, you then get into that frame of mind, because we are our thoughts. Our thoughts drive our feelings and emotions like overwhelm and stress. And then that also drives them behaviors and results and things like that. So if we address in terms of what we're thinking about, so if we decide to take 30 seconds out to think about that happy, calm place, you can do that in the office, you can do that at home, wherever you are, take 30 seconds and think about that calm space. That will then drive calm emotions and happy emotions. So that is the purpose of that one. So do give it a try. Do try all of these. What works for you will depend on the day, will depend like on the situation that you're facing, and will depend on you, right? I gave you an example of box breathing, but there are other breathing techniques. So if you just have a toolbox of these, that's what's important. The last is absolutely vital for your well-being. So I've given you some phrases here that you can use because I think that's what's most useful when it comes to boundaries. And so the boundaries here, it's really to buy you some time. It's not like the boundaries that we talk about in Clarity Under Pressure series. That course, that is more boundaries for actually cutting off and reducing your time, your time boundaries, your time load, your workload, and your emotional load. So those boundaries are slightly different. They prevent these sorts of situations. But this one is more in terms of just buying yourself time. So what we've got here, and you probably read on the screen, we've got the buffer, right? So let me look at this and get back to you in an hour. So that hour can change. You might need several hours. You might be sort of like, let me get back to you this evening, or let me get back to you tomorrow. That's all okay. I don't necessarily like to go under an hour because sometimes if we give ourselves too little time, it still gives you that pressure, right? So it's just to give you a bit of time, estimate up rather than down. So the next one here is the review loop. So let me review the details and get back to you. The third one I've got is the clarity check. So what part of this is the top priority now? Because often everything comes at you with urgency, and even for the task, right? If someone gives you a task, it's almost like what element of this task is actually urgent at the moment, or the top priority, because it might not necessarily be the thing that you're thinking about. And if you get the boss or your boss to narrow it down to that, you can say, okay, well, let me deliver that this afternoon, and I'm going to park the rest of it to next week when I have a bit more time. So you can manage the workloads from that perspective. And you can give yourself a bit of time to reduce that pressure by breaking it down into what is the actual priority within the task. Then there's the overnighter. I referenced it earlier in terms of giving yourself time. So I will give you an update by tomorrow. So when a boss says, oh, can I have an update now? Don't it might not necessarily be that urgent. And so you might be able to push back saying, well, okay, I'll give you an update tomorrow morning. They might come back saying, well, I actually have a meeting with the client this afternoon. And so, okay, well, I'll give it to you in an hour type of thing. So it's almost negotiating that piece. So don't take everything as firm. The next one is the capacity audit. So I need to check my current workload first. So this is certainly something that can be challenging to do. And we discuss more of it in our Clarity Under Pressure course as to how best to manage these workload boundaries. The next one is, I suppose to sum up, is basically protect your peace. Buying time is your power move. So certainly something that is worth taking a look at in terms of what phrases you can use, and having a toolbox of these phrases is important because you might need to sort of adapt depending on the situation. So for more boundaries, do check out our Clarity Under Pressure course. And like I said, the important thing is to have a toolbox of strategies. So in the moment relief, we've got coping mechanisms and processing emotions. So coping mechanisms, like we discussed today, there's 3 different angles to it. For coping mechanisms, they're great to have, but they'll keep you in the cycle. So the key thing with that is that if you just use the coping mechanisms, it's basically, okay, well, you'll deal with that stress in the moment, and then something else might pop up 2 hours later and your stress spikes again, right? Have you experienced that? I certainly have. I certainly have experienced that. I know, and hope you can relate to that. Well, I hope you can't relate to that, but if you do, that's okay. That's normal. And we can get caught into this spiral or this cycle of not actually addressing the underlying stress. So it might be sort of related stress until we address the underlying reason behind the stress. So that's what the processing of the emotions is. And we talk about this in a lot of our other material. For processing emotions, it's about naming the emotions. So naming the stress, naming the anxiety, whatever is causing you the pressure, and then identify where it's sitting within your body. So typically the pressure, it could be sitting in the upper body, but it depends on the individual, and then also the type of emotion that you're feeling. And then understand what triggered you. Why did it trigger you? So if there's a particular stress, it could be that you've got an underlying fear that's causing you stress. So what would be stressful to you might not necessarily be stressful to someone else. And so why is that? What is triggering you to be stressful in that moment? Because someone else's peace and harmony and happiness, someone likes to be on stage, someone likes to be in the camera or on camera, but someone else, that would be pressure. That would be fear, because the fear of, say, being judged by others, the fear of mistakes or something like that. So what the processing of the emotions does is get to the root cause. And that then leads into our Thursday session in terms of actual sustainable habits. But it's important to note that it's not just about coping mechanisms within the moment. In order to actually reduce the amount of stress that you're feeling in a day-to-day basis and what keeps on getting triggered, that has to be addressed by processing the emotions, understanding the reason behind things. And it could be a belief that is limiting you and limiting your true potential. So you could lose out on your true potential if you don't understand the root causes and seek guidance as to how to address the root cause. And we do cover that in a lot of our series. So the Spark Speaker series, which deals with day 1 relief, and then of course the Clarity Under Pressure course. So do check those out if you've wanting to invest in yourself and wanting to get out of the cycle of these stressful moments, reducing the number that you actually experience each day. So based on what you've been hearing about today, what is one action that you're going to do today? Have a think about it. Like I said, I would recommend that you build a toolbox of coping mechanisms, because what might work in one moment or one situation might not necessarily work in the next. So having a toolbox to draw from is certainly important. And I'm just actually going to say another action that you can take today is giving yourself the guidance. So, I think these days it's difficult to understand, the credible, where can I get credible information? Yes, there's YouTube, and certainly I'm on it at the moment. But it's more, what I found challenging was who's actually legit? Where's the actual credible information? And so that's what the Spark series is really drawing out. The Spark Speaker series is podcast style, and I'm talking to, with my 20 years of experience in the corporate space, I'm talking to experts like trauma experts and cognitive therapists to understand the science behind why we do what we do, how we why are we feeling the anxiety and so on, and what can we do about it. And then our team discuss sort of like know what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them within the corporate space. Because it's one thing understanding the theory, but it's another thing actually trying to put it into like action and application within the corporate space, because the corporate space is complex. It's there's a lot going for it. But there's also a lot of challenges with regards to the corporate space. So for the Spark Speaker Series, those toxic relationships, so managing relationships, how do you manage and set boundaries within relationships? We're talking to a trauma expert there who knows how best to handle difficult individuals, whether you're junior to you or more senior to you. There's good strategy, or there's brilliant strategies within there. Embracing change and managing anxiety. Those are two focused on, I suppose, the uncertainty that we have, living in the present, right? You hear about that, but what does that actually mean? How do we actually do it? And that anxiety that we feel about the uncertainty within the world. And of course, we've got we've got reclaiming energy, which is energy is basically our base, right? So if we don't have energy to do anything, we're not going to be able to do it. So getting that energy level up is probably the first thing that you need to do if you're not there already. So if you don't have necessarily a full tank, definitely check out our reclaiming energy session, where we talk about what's actually draining your energy and how can you actually address the root cause and uplift yourself each day. So the other one that I highlight there, we've got much more on our website and in our school community. But the other one there is Connected But Alone. We are on technology these days. We're surrounded by technology, but we can feel alone. And especially in the corporate world where there's a bit of a sense of distrust with colleagues, and bosses, potentially based on past experiences or what you hear. And so it's who can you trust? How can you sort of get connected with individuals? Because connection is a core innate human quality that we need. So it's something that each human needs. And so if you're not getting that, that's something to consider watching, as we've got tips that also covers off a digital detox. So if you need a break away from the always on culture, that is certainly for you. The next one also, if you're past the day one relief, if with these strategies today, you've got the coping mechanisms and you're going to attend the Thursday session for the more sustainable habits, take a look at the clarity under pressure. This takes you from basically just surviving the days to truly thriving. So it takes you to the next level. And in clarity under pressure, we've got communication influence, because that is going to help you get from where you are to where you want to go, your actual results. And then emotional intelligence, that's like part and parcel with communication. You can't influence people. You can't influence decisions without understanding the emotions behind them. And of course, identity and resilience, everyone's going to face setbacks. I'm sure you probably have. And you can probably name dozens of them that you've experienced recently or in the past. And it's not that quick recovery. How do you get that rapid recovery so it doesn't wreck your entire day? I certainly have had those days where, something bad happened and then it just wrecked my afternoon, right? So it's not letting that individual or setback wreck your entire day, put you off course. It's that rapid recovery and grounded presence. The next is your competitive advantage, which is to focus with intention. So many distractions these days. We talked about it, the always on culture. Just there, I referenced it. You're always on. Pings from a phone, everyone coming at you. It's a matter of how do you actually focus on what's actually going to move the needle. And the last is, of course, with these modules, is the decision with uncertainty. So this is basically if you get stuck with making decisions because you want to make the right decision, there's no one right decision, because even if it's taking action if it's like a mistake, it's a learning experience, right? So you're actually more knowledgeable than you were 5 minutes ago before the decision. And so each step that you take, each action that you take is either a learning opportunity or it's the result that you actually want. So it's really a resetting of your mindset, your perspective on things, which has really helped from my perspective. My way of looking at the world these days, looking at setbacks these days, taking the positives and focusing on the positives, even though you acknowledge the negatives to those. So absolutely check that out. Of course, with our Claudia Precious series, that is more going from surviving to thriving. So we are 8 months, and I do know that I've gone slightly over, so hopefully you're still with me on this one as I'm trying to over deliver to you. We are 8 months into 2026, and is 2026 looking a little like 2025? Well, if we're going to live 100 years, don't live the same year 100 times. Live a different year. So this could be your year. 2026 could be your year that you transform your life and actually get the results that you want. So, if you don't transform your life, if you don't take the chance to invest in yourself today, you're most likely going to do the same thing tomorrow. You're going to put off, you're going to delay, you can invest in yourself, saying, I've actually got these other things to focus on rather than on myself. I've done that. I say it because I've done it. I've been there. And in doing that, you will lose out on the results and the joyful, fulfilling life that you want. So just do this today. And with that, of course, in the spirit of that, we're also giving you a 40% discount. Clarity is the discount code. Put that into the website when you purchase the series. It's also on the modules, but it's also on the full series, 40% off. It's a huge discount because it's just a matter of trying to help others. That's the reason why I'm here today. I want to use my experience to help others. Hopefully you found these insights helpful, and I share more of them through all different means. And if you want to go from really just surviving the day to thriving, is something that I wanted to do, but I didn't have the guidance. I didn't have the community to be able to encourage me and support me through it. So that's what I've built with Thrive Space, and that's what I've built for you. So take advantage of that. This is your opportunity, your time to invest in you. Thank you for joining the live stream today. The coping mechanisms have their place. Ideally, we can minimize the occurrence of which we need to use them, and that is through sustainable solutions. So join us for Thursday. That's part 2 of the series, where we talk about those sustainable habits that are truly going to help you transform your life. So control your life, control your destiny, or someone else will. The choice is yours. Thank you again for joining, and see you on Thursday.